Welcome, everybody, to the Sheridan Report, brought to you by Bet Dsi. To get up to 100% cash back bonus on your first deposit, go to betdsi.eu and put in the promo code TGT, or go to the top of the grillingtruth.com page. And then you still put in the promo code TGT, but it'll take you directly to Bet Dsi. And then I am your co-host, Mike Goodpastor. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing great, and I want to get straight into stuff because with the baseball mornings, we got our three-team parlay, our mix and match stuff, which is now 4. I've added a game. They're all 3 of those 4 are starting right now, so let's go over them.
All right, let's go over them.
We've got a 10:05 start. This is all Pacific time, so we're past that. It's 10:06. That was the Phillies with Nola. Okay, but that's gone. But you can still get in. There's a 10:10, the New York Mets, a 10:10 Cleveland Indians, and a 12:05 Oakland A's. So we got those 2 for you right now that start in 4 minutes. That's the Mets with Syndergaard over the Rockies. You know, the Rockies are throwing a fellow by the name of Jeff Hoffman. We got Syndergaard at home. I believe the Mets will take care of this game on a getaway day. And the Cleveland Indians, this is an ad that was late. I was waiting for the line on this game, and this is Shane Bieber, who, all right, he's going to be a Cleveland Indian in a while. He's a young pitcher, second year, great stuff. We've talked about him before on the show, about his top 10 status as maybe a 2-year and below right-hander in the league. But Cleveland, you know, Mike, we talked about this the other day too. This is their final stretch. Very good organization. They've won that division maybe 5 years in a row. Terry Francona, World Series manager, playoff experience all up and down the roster. Lindor, Ramirez not having great years. Kluber's been out. Bauer is supposed to be a Cy Young candidate. He's up and down. Young guy Bieber here. Guys like Kipnis, and those players have been around a long time. They may not look like the Cleveland Indians in another 30 days, another 60 days, because the trade deadline is so important here now this year, July 31st. There is no more August stuff. They've done away with that. So there's already talking about Lindor, Bauer, a couple other names, Brad Hand, their closer. So this team, it's now or never for them to get themselves back in the race, and they take 2 out of 3 just from Minnesota, and they've beaten the Yankees twice. Today they're going for it again, and they have the pitching matchup in their favor. So I like them at 10-10 as a late ad. Mike, and then we finish with the Oakland A's at 12:05. That's another good pitching advantage with Frankie Montas. Maybe the A's, maybe an all-star starter for them this year. He could be named. He's in the conversation against uninspired Drew Smiley, who has not pitched well for Texas, and that's why they're plus 168 at home in that series. So that's the 4 mix and match, Mike. I want to get those out real quick. 2 of those 3 are starting right now. 3 of the 4 have already started. 4 starting right now. So that's the parlay. And then let's get into a couple of the straight plays. I've got, 3 straight plays. And I'll go over the top play. How's that? Okay. And that is the White Sox today. And that line updated, Mike, is, where is it at? Right there. It's 11:15 start, plus 122, the White Sox. And same idea, Mike, as we talked about the other day when we lost with the White Sox, is I feel like, okay, Minnesota's taken over that division. It's the AL Central. Cleveland's fallen back. And you've got teams like the White Sox and Royals trying to make a push to get back up into, the top, towards the top of that division with Minnesota. So who's the next team who makes that jump? And I'm predicting it to be the White Sox. Their farm system, the players that are playing right now on the major league level, they're only 3 games behind, under 500, to whereas Kansas City's 24 behind 500. You're looking at Cleveland selling in the All-Star break. So I'm looking ahead to next year where Minnesota is the king. Who's coming out of the pack? It's going to be the White Sox. And the White Sox, Mike, I believe that they'll win this ball game today, finish off this series. And, you looked at that division. I saw a stat this morning. Minnesota, 122 home runs. Cleveland, White Sox, Kansas City, last in the American League. Something like 79, 78, and 77, something like that. That's the difference right there, Mike. And then the bullpen. That's why Minnesota's taking that big jump. The White Sox will be the next team. They have power potential. They have guys coming up, big power. They'll be the next team to make that Minnesota leap. And I liked him today with Lopez, veteran starter on the mound, over an inconsistent Sparkman. So that's my top play today.
All right.
And there's your baseball.
Or do you want to go to hockey? Because tonight we've got Game 6. The St. Louis Blues can win the first Stanley Cup in the history of the franchise at home as they take on the favored Boston Bruins. Now, St. Louis is favored now. What do you got on the line on yours there, Bobby?
Let me pull it up right now, Mike. I've got it pulled up. I got St. Louis as a home favorite, minus 120.
All right, and I think this. I think that the Bruins are clearly the better team. I think the Bruins outplayed them in Game 5. There was a horrendous call that cost them. But the problem here is the first two lines for the Bruins have been terrible. And Patrick Bergeron, Brett Marchand, and David Pastrnak have been outmatched to this point. They've scored 0 points at 5-on-5 through 5 games. Marchand in particular is disturbing because he hasn't scored a point at 5-on-5 in 11 straight Stanley Cup Finals games since 2011 against the Canucks. The interesting thing about the Canucks series in 2011 is same situation. The Bruins were down 3-2 and actually came back and won the Cup. The Bruins were down 3-2 to Toronto, came back, beat Toronto. They were down against Columbus, came back and beat Columbus, only that was in 6 games. They were down 2-1 at one point. So this is a team that has been resilient, but I would take the Bruins tonight, or the Blues tonight, even though I think the Bruins are better, and it's from what I said at the start. And what I said at the start was Jordan Binnington will be the difference in this series. And this is maybe the greatest comeback story in NHL history because the Blues were the worst team in the NHL in January. And now they're 1 win away from taking the Stanley Cup home. And I think this, even if they lose tonight, I'm going to bet them in Game 7. I'm going to win 1 or 2. But I think tonight Jordan Binnington plays out of his mind. The two questions here are, can the Bruins overcome losing that last game on a horrendous non-call on the tripping? And can the Blues take the pressure of winning the Stanley Cup at home? Because this is a team that's been around for 50 years. This is the first opportunity they've had to do this at home where they've got a clinching game to beat a Stanley Cup champions. There's a lot of pressure there. And I know a lot of people say that home ice or home field or home court makes a huge difference. It can sometimes, but also it can have the direct opposite effect also. But I think what we have here is a team in the Blues that have worked their asses off. And they have basically forechecked and defended themselves to within 1 win of the Stanley Cup. And I think tonight, they finish this off. I think Jordan Binnington plays great. I would actually maybe lean towards the under here, but I've got it right at, I think the over-under is 5, isn't it, Bobby?
Yeah, it's 5, and the over, because it's 5, is the over is favored, minus 140.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I think this. I think you're going to get a St. Louis Blues win 3-1 tonight.
So a Blues under. Mike, this is just from a sporting background, not particularly hockey, but a couple of things that I watched or I'm observing here you can talk about. The Blues, there were not the expectations to win a championship this year, certainly not in January. So although the pressure maybe is on right now, this is a team that's just kind of riding a wave. So I feel like the fans and the home all come together and can all...
Yeah, but the one thing you got to look at is during these playoffs, I think they may even have a losing record at home. So you got to take that into effect also. So when I
Yeah.
look at it, I think this game is dang near a toss-up. But I'm just going to go with the hot goalie. And I think this though, if Rask from Boston was to play out of his mind in the next two games, Boston could win this series. But
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the youngster in Jordan Bennington. Maybe he's so young he didn't know any better.
Mike, that's a great, and I've heard you talk about him as being the key difference way back on a show you did towards the beginning of the playoffs with the young kid you bring in, Sam. And I've heard you say Jordan Bennington 20 times.
Yeah,
And
and
here,
I picked the Blues at the start of these playoffs.
yes, you did. And I was not watching, but I kind of gotten some updates on the last game. I saw that Boston was out shooting them badly the whole game, but not scoring. And Bennington was making all these saves. Like Boston pretty much outplayed them 2-1 last game and got the bad call or the bad non-call. Game 5 was Boston's game, correct? I mean, it's just
They basically got stopped by a hot goaltender.
Yeah, and so my thoughts on this would be, the Blues, if they don't win it tonight, I believe would be in big trouble. Game 7 in Boston. That's just something to think ahead to. I know you said you'd come right back.
I'd take them. I think they win Game 7 I think they're going to win this. I just think Jordan Bennington's going to be the difference one way or the other.
I think they're going to win it tonight for you, Mike, and for your fans. And, this will finish off the hockey. You've had a great playoff run on our show. So let's get them the win tonight, minus 120. Connected to that under 5, which is plus a 120. Or if you're not really comfortable with the total, you can connect it maybe with my top play, which was the White Sox, or with one of those mix and matches I gave you to start the show off, one of those parlay, which is only one left, which is the 12:05 the A's, or roll it into tomorrow night's basketball game, Mike.
All right, Bobby.
Basketball game, the NBA game tomorrow night. We'll go over it in depth tomorrow, but that's Toronto -3 at home, trying to finish off their series.
All right, Bobby, what do you want to talk about for on this day?
On this day, well, there's two that stood out for me. Let's go one at a time here. Let's see how we do on the first one. The first one's got to be first because that's 1978, Larry Holmes against Ken Norton. This was for the heavyweight title.
It wasn't, but it was for a portion of it because Leon Spinks owned the title from beating Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was the true champion, but Holmes Norton was one of the greatest fights that you'll ever see. You could sit there and you could go on YouTube and put on the 14th and 15th rounds and put the Rocky music on, and it would, suit the thing perfectly. They went to absolute war. The thing I remember about this fight was watching Sylvester Stallone and Roberto Duran sit next to each other, both of them jumping out of their seats all the way through this fight. And this was a fight where the year before, in 1977, Ken Norton won a controversial decision over Jimmy Young. Now, where I'm going with this has to do with controversial decisions. Kenny Norton beats Jimmy Young by a controversial decision, and the WBC basically stripped the title from Leon Spinks and gave it to Ken Norton because Spinks decided to defend against Ali. That's the first part of this. Now, Larry Holmes ends up winning a great fight. We've talked about Larry Holmes a lot before on this, so I'm going to turn this more towards Ken Norton and more towards perception. And the big problem with boxing is this. When you look at the history of Ken Norton, most people say, well, he wasn't a real champion because he wasn't. But a lot of people will look down on him because of his attempts against Jerry Cooney, Ernie Shavers, and George Foreman, big punchers who all knocked him out quickly. But let's go back to March, I think it was March of 1973. Muhammad Ali fought Ken Norton. Ken Norton was unknown at the time. Ken Norton was a 5-1 underdog. And I think Ken Norton beat Muhammad Ali in 1973. I think that was a bigger upset than what we saw last week with Andy Ruiz and Anthony Joshua. Now, we move on. They fight a rematch. The second fight, Ali beats Norton by a really close split decision. Norton could have easily won that fight. He then gets starched by Foreman. He comes back. He beats Jerry Quarry. I think he beat Ron Stander, who had fought for the title against Joe Frazier at one point, and he fights a third fight at Yankee Stadium in New York City. And most people thought he beat Ali there. Now, this is what I'm talking about with perception. He loses the close fight to Holmes in 78. Could have won either way. I think Holmes won the fight by a point, but it was so close it could have won either way. Now, when you look at the second and third Ali fights, how does Norton's career change if he gets the decision? He would have beaten Muhammad Ali 3 times. He would probably be considered one of the top 10 heavyweights of all time. Now, the second fight, the second fight, I think Ali won. The third fight, most people I know think that Kenny Norton beat Muhammad Ali. If he beats Muhammad Ali there, he becomes the heavyweight champion of the world. When you look at that, that changes all perceptions towards him. And it's just like Gennady Golovkin fought last night. And I know we had a question during our Inside Boxing Daily show on Friday night where somebody asked us if we thought that Triple G was a hype job like Anthony Joshua because he'd never really beaten anybody. But 90% of boxing people that I respect believe that Triple G beat Canelo the first fight, and probably 80% of those thought he won the second fight. So if he doesn't get fucked out of the decision in those 2 fights with Canelo, people would be asking how high you rank him as an all-time great middleweight instead of asking if he's a hype job. And it was nothing of his doing because he won those fights. It was clear that he won those fights, and they were stolen from him. And you could go back in history on close decisions or bad decisions. There was a guy by the name of Dave Tiberi that was like a 30-1 underdog that beat James Toney on ABC back in the, I think it was the mid-90s, late 90s, or early 90s maybe even. But the thing is this, Dave Tiberi never fought again because he was sick of boxing in the way it was run. Now, when you look at this, Dave Tiberi, if he gets that decision, goes down as the light heavyweight champion of the world. It changes his entire life. And this happens so much in boxing where somebody gets screwed over and it changes perception of them forever. I mean, Ken Norton, if he just gets the third fight against Muhammad Ali and wins that decision, he's an all-time great. Nobody questions him, even if he gets knocked out 3 years later by Ernie Shavers in a title defense. You know, if he beats Larry Holmes, if he gets the decision against Holmes, which could have won either way, so I'm not saying he got screwed out of it, but if he gets that close decision against Holmes, then he's the champion. And then who knows who he fights after that. Maybe it ends up in October of 1980, he gets to fight Ali for a 4th time. He would have beat him because Ali was a shell of his former self. But it's just the sad thing in boxing is with people getting screwed out of decisions, it changes the perception of fighters overall. I mean, there's a guy by the name of Rocky Lockridge who, when he fought 2 all-time great fighters in Eusebio Pedroza at featherweight, and then he fought Julio Cesar Chavez. He beat them both. He beat Wilfredo Gomez. And in all 3 fights, they were all 3 basically on home turf for the champion. And all 3 times, those fights are taken from Lockridge. So now when Lockridge dies, he dies broke and homeless. If he wins those 3 fights, he's probably not broke and homeless, number one. And number two, when he dies, people are going to say, well, he was a really good fighter. He was a champion for a little bit. They're actually going to say Rocky Lockridge, who beat Julio Cesar Chavez, Wilfredo Gomez, and Eusebio Pedroza, died today. He was one of the 10 greatest featherweights of all time. But instead, he's just some broke, homeless guy that used to be a boxer who died. And the sad thing is, and this is the conversation we had the other night on the horse racing show, and the question is, are the horses taken care of? Well, yeah, the horses are taken care of while they're productive and while they're racing. NFL players are taken care of while they're productive and while they are playing. Boxers are taken care of while they're productive, while they're fighting. But once the people in those 3 sports, and I think all 3 are combat sports. For a horse, that racing is so traumatic, I think it's a combat sport for a horse. And the thing that's bad here is when you look at football and boxing, those guys are basically, nobody cares about them when they're done. I mean, football players after 1993, they're taken care of much better now. They've got pensions, but not what it should be. Horses are put out to pasture sometimes. Other times, they're basically killed because nobody wants them. And boxers, the same thing. There's so many boxers that end up homeless and destitute that shouldn't. I mean, when you've got a boxing promoter, a boxing trainer, a boxing manager, if you make $100,000 for a fight, by the time you're done, you got 15 or 20 grand that you just made for that fight. So the problem here is, for some reason, boxers, horses, football players, they're well taken care of until they're no longer useful. And when, in the case of football and boxers, let's face it, most of those didn't, especially with boxers. Boxers grow up basically with nothing, because people that fight for a living are fighting for a living for a reason. It's their only way out. And then the problem is, the people that are above them are rich assholes who basically will take advantage of their stupidity. I mean, Don King used to tell a story where he owed Muhammad Ali $1.5 million. And he walked in and he offered Ali a check for $1.5 million or $100,000 cash. And Ali, who grew up poor, took the $100,000 cash because that was real money that was right there that he could touch right then. So what you have is you have rich people that take advantage of poor people, and then when they don't need them anymore, they throw them away. And the sad thing is, boxing is a microcosm of the society we live in right now for everybody. You know, if you're useful to the company you work for, they'll take care of you. Once you're no longer useful, they get rid of you. Poor people are taken advantage of by rich people. That boxing is the United States culture. The culture in most of the world, but especially in the United States right now, where the poor people, if they can help you, you'll use them till they can't help you no more.
Well, I mean, your conversation brings up so many points, but one thing I got two things in my head I want to expand on. I want you to expand on. Number one is, whose responsibility, though, is it once a fighter, a football player, is done, wouldn't it be their family's responsibility, their loved ones?
My question is this. If you're the owner of an NFL team and you're now worth $3 billion off what guys in the 60s did, as a human being, are you not going to take care of those guys? Because they're the reason you made that money. As a boxer, the promoters and matchmakers are already stealing from you. Why can't they at least take care of you when you're done? And the families we just established, these are poor people. Poor people don't know how to manage their money, and it's not like these boxers and these football players are being shown how to manage their money. They might be now in the NFL, but 20 years ago they weren't. And when you take somebody that's poor and all of a sudden give them a bunch of money, there it goes. Because they're not used to having the money. They don't know how to manage the money. So, yeah, you could say that. But my response to you is the NFL is now a multi-billion-dollar business. And, when you work for a big corporation and you work for them and you're productive for them, they usually give you a pension when you're done. Boxers don't get that. When a boxer's done, and a boxer's usually done between the ages of 30 and 40. The perfect example is Zab Judah. He fought a guy by the name of Cletus Selden Friday night. Zab Judah was a former junior welterweight champion of the world. He fought Floyd Mayweather, and he needed money. He came back to fight a young Cletus Selden, who's a young up-and-coming guy, and they allowed him to fight at the age of 41 Friday night. And now he's in the hospital with his brain bleeding, and he may not live. Now, I don't think you should tell a man, no matter what his age is, that he can't do something. But I think it's really sad that you got promoters that make all this money. And people don't realize most guys that are professional boxers are making hundreds of dollars, maybe in the low thousands, but they're not making millions of dollars. You know,
Right.
if you make your pro debut and you didn't go to the Olympics or something, 4 round fight, you're making $400. Now, if you have trainers and stuff that take money, you're making $200, and you're basically risking your life. But the
Yeah.
promoters and the matchmakers make the money. Now, if
Make
you work at
money.
Walmart for 40 years, they're going to take care of you when you're done. Not that well because it's Walmart. But the idea here is with boxers, there's no pension for boxers. And when you say the family should take care of it, I think that maybe the people making money off of these people should give them a pension because that's how it works in the NBA. It's how it works in Major League Baseball. It works that way in the NFL for people after 93. The people before 93 are still getting at least something, where boxers get absolutely nothing for what they've done.
Yeah. Well, the idea also, my second point, as you were talking, was regarding history being changed based on wrong decisions and outlooks being changed. And that's so true with the singular sports, the boxing, tennis, individual sports. So whereas in a team sport, a player is kind of part of the team and their destination.
Yeah, but it changes. How about this? Drew Brees, if he gets that call, goes to the Super Bowl and wins the Super Bowl, he's got 2 Super Bowls, and it all of a sudden puts him in an entirely different light with people.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So even though that's a team sport, it's the individual is the quarterback or in basketball.
Or the head coach. Sean Payton would now possibly have 2 Super Bowl rings.
Right. And getting into that status of one of the best of all time.
Yeah.
Multiple Super Bowl rings. Not many people have multiple. How many coaches have multiple? Who comes to mind? Of course, Belichick and Tom Landry. I don't know.
Chuck Noll.
Jerry Johnson or Jimmy
Johnson, Tom Flores. There's 6 or 7 guys.
Right. So all of a sudden he's in that category. You're right. What a Super Bowl that would have been. I think maybe as it turns out, the Saints would have been a better opponent.
Yeah. The Saints would have been a much better opponent. The Saints had a quarterback. The Saints had an offense.
Yeah.
So, all right, you want to talk about a little NBA too on this day?
I would like to, Mike, because there's another one that's pretty big here. Sports fans are going to like. We were privy to some of the greatest basketball NBA ever was in the 80s, you and I. And 1985, the 39th NBA championship, the Lakers beat the Celtics 4-2. Now, you're going to have to bring us up to speed on 85 and where we're at.
I lost my ass on this series, Bobby. I had a friend named Lee. We were in high school together, and I was so sure that the Celtics were going to win. To get him to bet me, I bet him $10 and gave him 10-1 odds, Bobby. I didn't know any better. But
no, you didn't know any better.
The thing about this series, the Celtics had won in 7 games the year before. The Celtics had home court advantage. They won 63 games that year. I think the Lakers won 62. Game 1 is always known as the Memorial Day Massacre. The Celtics beat the Lakers in Game 1, 148-114. The Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was held to 12 points and 3 rebounds in a matchup with Robert Parrish. Magic Johnson only had 1 rebound. Danny Ainge of the Celtics started the game hot, scored 15 points in the first quarter, and then Scott Wedman came out, and he's like the 8th guy on the team. And Wedman hits all 11 shots he took from the field. Afterwards, Abdul-Jabbar apologized to his teammates and to the fans for his terrible performance, and he made up for it in Game 2. Because Game 2...
Mike,
what?
I was going to stop you real quick. I'm putting myself back, in that mode, and I'm thinking, I'm just thinking how much money I would have made on Game 2. Because TSR, myself, would have been all over the Lakers in Game 2.
I wonder what the line was.
Well, the Celtics were favored, and I'm sure, and it was probably something.
Yeah, but I wonder if it was a big one or wonder if it was just like 3 or 4 points because it's still the Celtics and the Lakers.
5.5 points, something like that. 5.5 or 6. I'm guessing if we could go back to that time.
Right. But
yeah,
the Lakers recovered from the game one embarrassment, and old-ass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar made up for it. He played one of the best games I've ever seen a center play. I mean, he was running the floor. He looked like he was 22 playing at UCLA again, but he scored 30 points, 17 rebounds, 3 block shots, 8 assists. Lakers swingman Michael Cooper, who was usually the sixth man on that team, I think, helped by throwing in 22 points, hit 8 out of 9 shots, including several clutch outside jumpers to even the series at 1. They go back to Game 3, and in Game 3, the Celtics held like a 10-point lead in the second quarter, and then James Worthy, who Steve Risley said was not very good, goes off and leads the Lakers to like a 65-59 lead at halftime. Oh, if only the Celtics would have had Steve Risley to guard James Worthy. And then the Lakers pulled away in the second half, won the game 136-111. And during the game, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar became the league's all-time leading scorer. And meanwhile, Larry Bird's shooting slump from Game 2 continued. He shot a combined in Games 2 and 3, 17 of 42. Now we go to Game 4, and everybody thinks this is over, and this is where TSR would have jumped on the Celtics probably. And the Celtics trailed most of the game,
right.
And then they tied the series with a clutch buzzer beater by Dennis Johnson. DJ hits I think it was like a 20-foot jump shot. I think it was on the right.
I can still see it. It was on the right side.
Yeah, it was on the right, from like the right arc just inside the 3-point line. He hits that shot. They tied a series at 2 games all. And then Game 5, this is when you had a 2-3-2 series. In this game, the Lakers basically stomped out the Celtics by jumping out to a 13-point halftime lead, stretched it to 17 points before the Celtics cut the deficit all the way down to 4 late in the fourth quarter. Now, the Celtics would cut the lead to 4 several times, but the Lakers answered each time. Magic Johnson made 3 clutch shots. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scored like 8 points in the last 4 minutes. Michael Cooper hits a couple jumpers. They end up winning the game 120-111. But the thing I remember about this series is now they had to go back to the Boston Garden. And if you remember, from all the way back to like 1962 or 63, the Celtics and Lakers had played a bunch of times in the NBA Finals. And the Celtics always won. And a lot of times, you had Havlicek steals the ball. You had Don Nelson in 69, Game 7, shot off the back of the rim at the Forum, goes straight up in the air, and falls gently through the goal to win the series. So most people thought going in, the Celtics got this, even though they're down 3-2. And the series clincher, though, the Lakers held the Celtics to just 18 third-quarter points, blew the game open after it was tied at halftime. Kareem scored 29 points. James Worthy, who Steve Risley said was not a very good player, scored 28 as the Lakers became the first. I'm just teasing you, Steve. Not really. That was a stupid statement. But James Worthy scored 28 as LA became the first opposing team to ever clinch the title at the old Boston Garden. Magic Johnson dished out a game-high 14 assists. Kevin McHale, Steve Risley said he wasn't very good either. But Kevin McHale, even though Risley doesn't think he's very good, scored 32 points, grabbed 16 assists, both game highs. And also I would like to bring up, that's more points and more rebounds than Risley ever scored in 10 combined games as an Indiana Hoosier. Before fouling out in the fourth quarter. Larry Bird, this was probably the lowest point of Larry Bird's career at his prime. He had to 17 for 42 in games 2 and 3. Game 6, he shot dismally. He was 12 of 29. And the 37-year-old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was named the MVP of this series after playing maybe the worst game of his entire career in Game 1. It was the second time he'd won the NBA Finals MVP award. And the thing that's most impressive there is he won it in 1985. The first time he won it was in 1971, 14 years before. And Jabbar, for this 6-game series against Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, and all these guys, he averaged 26 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 block shots in the 6 games. And remember, that was after a game 1 where he had 12 points and 3 rebounds. So he averaged probably, if you take away game 1, 30 points and 14 rebounds in this series. James Worthy, who Steve Risley said wasn't very good, averaged 24 points a game for the Lakers, while Magic Johnson averaged 18 to go along with 14 assists and 7 rebounds. LA shot 51.2% as a team for the series. Kevin McHale, who Steve Risley said was not a very good player, led Boston into scoring with 26 points, 11 rebounds, while shooting 60% from the floor. Just imagine if he was good, Steve. Bird averaged 23 points, 9 rebounds, but he shot just 45% from the floor, which for most people would be good, but for him, it's atrocious. Celtics guard Dennis Johnson, who I think is one of the greatest defensive guards to ever live, shot 48% for the series. And the impressive thing here is Boston shot 48% from the field, out-rebounded the LA Lakers 259 to 256, and lost 4 games to 2.
Yeah, and 4 out of 5, really, since the massacre. And, Mike, if you stop it right there, that's 6 years in the 80s. 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. 6 seasons. Lakers had won 3 of the 6 championships after this title. You've got Kareem just delivering an MVP performance, not done yet. Still got a few years. Magic in his prime, probably the best player, him and Bird, but probably
Kareem
now
played until the 89 finals.
Right. So what's the most impressive where I'm going with this is the next year, what happens? Boston comes out and has the greatest team.
Well, they bring in Jerry Sheasting. They bring in Bill Walton. I mean, they added guys left and right. They had actually, I think, out of their 12 players on that roster, like 8 of them were in NBA All-Star games at one point. And if they were not the greatest team, the 1987 Lakers were. And the sad thing is this. In 1987, the Celtics were really beat up. Kevin McHale played on a broken foot. Larry Bird had a bad back. Robert Parrish was hurt. The entire team was beat up. They still took the Lakers 6 games. And that was the game where Danny Ainge hits a half-court shot in Game 5. I think it was to end the half or at the end of the third quarter. They blew out the Lakers
third
there.
Quarter, I think, yeah.
But it was a game or a series where the Lakers in '87 just destroyed the Celtics in the first 2 games. And then in Game 3, Greg Kite comes out and plays the game of his life. They win that. And then they get it to Game 4 where you get Magic Johnson's baby hook. And then Larry Bird rims out a shot at the buzzer from like 25 feet away. If he hits the shot, that series would have been 2-all. If Boston still wins Game 5, they'd have went to L.A. with a 3-2 lead. So I still think, just because of the injuries there, that the 86 Celtics were a little bit better than the 87 Lakers. But, God, I'd have loved to see a healthy 87 Celtics against a healthy 87 Lakers, because I think we'd have had a 7-game series for the ages.
We would have. And, the 86 team wins it for the Celtics. The Lakers come back in 87, and that would have been an unbelievable series. And then the Lakers got the repeat. In 88, they were the first team to repeat since the Celtics, I think in 69 or something. And that's when Pat Riley said rebounds equal rings. That was 88 against the Pistons. And then their reign ended in 89, going for the three-peat and the injuries. And Magic was out. Byron Scott was out. And I believe Cooper. They had 3 of their players.
89?
In 89, yeah, the final
89, they were going to get smoked anyways. They didn't have anything
well,
left
but
for the
still,
Pistons.
they had injuries. Magic pulled a hamstring, and Byron Scott, I believe, as well. And
yeah, but remember this. Those injuries didn't happen until towards the end of Game 2, and that series was already going to be 2-0 going to L.A.
Yeah.
And that Pistons team, I think, by then was better, because I still think an official's call decided 1988. Because 1988, you had a horrible foul call. I think it was on Rodman or Lambeer right at the end of Game 7. And that was the game where also, if Isaiah doesn't get hurt in Game 6, you remember Isaiah scored 25 points in the third quarter. And had the Pistons within seconds of winning a championship, he twists his ankle, has to play the fourth quarter on a twisted ankle, and
Probably.
the Lakers ended up winning by a point or two in Game 6 because the Pistons, I think, were up 3-2 at that time. So you had a couple really questionable calls in Game 7. So I still think the Pistons win. Maybe it's in 5 or 6 instead of 4. But that Pistons team was a great team, too. And I will still make this case. Until this Warriors team, the last great NBA team were the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys of 1989 and 90. I think that they were better than the Bulls. I think they proved that when they were in their prime. Because when you get to 91, you've got 3 of those guys hardly even playing in the playoffs in the regular season because of injuries. And they kind of broke down the way the Celtics did about 1987, where it seemed like everybody just kind of got old at the same time. But I'll just go back to this. The Bulls were pretty much the same team in 1990, and they were beaten by the Pistons. So I still think the Pistons, on their best day, the 89 or 90 Pistons, would beat any of those 6 Bulls championship teams.
I agree with you, except when did Pippen come?
Pippen came in 86, 87.
Oh, okay. So he came earlier. Okay.
Yeah, so that team,
right.
the 91 team for the Bulls was about the same team they had in 1990. The difference was Scottie Pippen had the headache and couldn't play in the 1990 Game 7 because he had a freaking headache. So if you're going to call anybody a sissy, it would be him. Because remember this, we talked about 1985. The interesting thing about 1985 was, and the same thing with 1984, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar always had problems with migraine headaches. And
Right.
it seemed like whenever they said Kareem had a migraine headache, he was going to drop 30. If he was completely healthy, he would score 20.
True. Except for the migraine that kept him out of the 80 finals where Magic played center. He stayed home. He stayed
That
back
wasn't a
in LA.
migraine.
I'm pretty sure it was.
You sure about that?
I'm pretty sure. Because he stayed back in Los Angeles and was going to play the next game had they lost Game 6. And they wanted him healthy for Game 7, and there was no Game 7 because Magic won it. Pretty sure. I don't think it was any injury to his leg or anything like that. I think it was a migraine. But that's just my recollection. I could be wrong.
I think you're wrong. I thought that he had like a severely sprained ankle or something. Hold on. Let me look.
Yeah. Mike, and you made that statement about the last great team before this Golden State. Those Bulls guys, if they were on the air with us right now, they'd laugh at us. They'd laugh at that statement. The Bulls have every right to believe that they had
Here you
a
go.
great.
I wanted to bring this up since I was right, so I'm going to interrupt you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the league's MVP, but midway through Game 5, the Lakers center suffered a severely sprained ankle. He managed to come back in the game in the fourth quarter to lead the Lakers to a victory and a 3-2 lead in the best-of-7 series, but the Lakers still had to travel to Philadelphia for Game 6. Abdul-Jabbar was listed as out of Game 6, although 76ers coach Billy Cunningham was quoted as saying, "I won't believe he's not playing until their plane lands and he's not on it." As it turned out, the plane landed, he was not on it.
Good, Mike. Well, your memory was better than mine, and I give you credit for that.
Yeah, I don't think Kareem was ever missing a game because he had a headache.
Right. Well,
maybe if he had a messed up calf muscle, though, because it's hard to play on one of those.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, if you've got any type of lower extremity injury, you cannot play on that.
See, I know this because of this. The reason my time in college was shortened was because I had a strained calf muscle. They taped my foot a specific way and told me it would be fine. And the next thing you know, I'm running down the court, and it feels like somebody took a baseball and hit me in the back of the calf with it. And my calf had actually snapped and rolled up inside my leg. So that's how I know he's not a coward for not playing. He's extremely smart. And, when the team physicians from Golden State tell you that he can't play, he can't play.
Yeah, I read your article this morning, and it was very well pointed out. You mentioned that in your article. It's on thegruelingtruth.com right now. It's a good article if the fans want to read that. And, it just goes to show you Magic was on that plane, though. And all-time greatness.
Well, plus they had Norm Nixon on that
Shows
plane, Jamal Wilkes on that plane. So that plane still had plenty of all-stars to go win a basketball game. And the thing people forget is this. It's not like Moses Malone was playing center for the Sixers. They had Daryl Dawkins, who was, I mean, he had some really cool nicknames like Chocolate Thunder and the Doctor of Love, and he broke some backboards, but he was basically somebody who never really lived up to what people thought he would be, and he basically got abused in Game 6. So,
well, yeah.
If they'd have had Moses Malone, they'd have lost that Game 6. Moses Malone would have owned Magic Johnson at center.
Isn't that amazing? Philadelphia gets him in 83, 4-4-4. You know, the Celtics get Walton as a six-man in 86.
Well, they got Jerry Sheasting, too. When people forget, Sheasting was an all-star guard with the Pacers. And the reason that they got Sheasting was to improve their outside shooting, which they had trouble with in 85 because Gerald Henderson was pretty much at the end of his career. And they traded, I think, they ended up trading Cedric Maxwell and who else was it? Cedric Maxwell and Quinn Buckner. And they traded those two and somehow got Bill Walton and Jerry Sheasting out of it. And Cedric Cornbread Maxwell was one of the greatest big game players of all time. And I know a lot of people questioned why they would get rid of those two to pick up the other two. But Sheasting was an infinitely better player than Quinn Buckner. I mean, a lot better than Quinn Buckner. And Bill Walton, who knew, actually played an entire year healthy.
Right. And you know what you got there if he's healthy.
Yeah,
and
they got lucky.
Picking up big men, you know, those Bulls teams had, you know, picked up guys like Will Perdue or Bill Cartwright, correct?
Yeah, but that's why I don't think they were a great team. Because I think when you play against those teams in the 80s, though, you got issues.
I'm just pointing out, though, that, you know, picking up a big man, what that can do, and I'm going to bring it to today. The Toronto Raptors, who'd they get at the All-Star break, Mike?
I don't know. Who'd they get, Bobby?
Marc Gasol.
Yep. Actually, it was after the All-Star break, wasn't it?
Or after. You know,
okay,
I mean,
that's why you confused me. I couldn't remember who they got at the All-Star break.
Yeah, but, you know, what I'm saying is, you know, about halfway through, they made that big trade for, you know, they picked him up. And look what he's done for that team. He's fit in so perfectly, and he's about ready to help them win a championship. You know, a big man in basketball that fits and does, you know, it's huge.
It is nowadays because there's almost no big men in basketball. At least not big men the way we remember big men.
Right.
And Gasol can dominate a game defensively inside.
Yeah, and he also hits the three now and makes all the great passes. And, you know, it's proven that with him on the floor, he's one of the best plus-minus guys in the whole series.
Well, how about this? He's kind of like the Bill Laimbeer of today.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison.
Because you remember Laimbeer kick out, hit a 25-foot three, and then go down and punch somebody in the nose.
Right. And his brother was so much more famous than Mark. You know, Powell with the Lakers and winning, I think he won 2 or 3 championships. But Mark's getting his time now and his due. And if you look at the best two-way players in that series, you know, who are they? You know, two-way. You know, you got Thompson for Golden State. You got Kawhi for Toronto, okay. And then the next level of conversation, Gasol's right there. You know, two-way player. Gasol's right there.
If he could score 15 points a game, I'd go with that. But he's been kind of inconsistent. But if he puts up 15 tomorrow night, they're going to win. And tomorrow, you can hear us at approximately 2:30 to give you the winner of that game. And also, you can check out in the morning at grillingtruth.com article I wrote on the game, previewing the game, giving you a pick there, plus a link to Bet DSI if you want to make a little money with us tomorrow night. So make sure you check that out. I want to also remind everybody they can get the Sheridan Report at thesheridanreport.com on the internet or at Sheridan Report. You can follow Bobby on Twitter. Also, the handicapping guide, which now I've figured out the name with. I'm pretty comfortable with it, Bobby. But you can check out
Good.
THG by going halfway down on the right-hand side of the gruelingtruth.com page, clicking that with Phil. And I would highly suggest you listen to our Belmont Stakes show, even though the Belmont's over, with Vince DeGregory, who is a horse racing legend, and Phil, who is one of the best there is at handicapping the ponies. So make sure you check all that out. Make sure you go to betdsi.eu. Use the promo code TGT. Anything else before we wrap it up, Bobby?
Yeah, that series line now, Golden State's plus over 5-1. You can get something like 5-10 or something on them to win 3 straight. I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't discourage anybody that thinks that is from betting.
I don't think this series is over. Even though I think it is, but it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't. How about that?
Yeah, I'm just happy I'm sitting at 2 plus 255 with the team that I think's going to win it. That's Toronto, and that's plus 255. So we got a game tomorrow night, Mike, and we'll talk about that game tomorrow, and let's see if we can get through the MLB a winner today. And that's all I got, Mike.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. We'll be back with you at the Sheridan Report tomorrow about 2:30 Eastern Time. You can also hear Survive in Advance at noon tomorrow, where we'll recap tonight's hockey game, preview tomorrow night's basketball game, and tonight, I believe at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, we will have an Inside Boxing Weekly show. It'll be either 8 or 9. Keep an eye out on Twitter for that. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts. You'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Bobby Sheridan, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.